Hey guys, so I'm going to be talking about extroverted feeling in the first slot, the dominant function of the ESFJ and ENFJ personality types. So, some keywords for FE are facial expressions. It's one that I like to use a lot. The only thing is, it's a bit too complex to explain for this video. I might consider doing it in the future, but as far as any keyword in general that I share with you guys, make sure that if it doesn't work for you, just toss it out. And remember that no keyword is going to work 100% of the time, every time. That's the importance of having backups. But as far as some more, we've got harmony in a musical sense, in an aesthetic sense, especially harmonizing with others and groups, and really giving your attention towards them and knowing what to do in those situations, which goes hand in hand with social dynamics, social cues, understanding what's appropriate, being polite, manners, what's acceptable in the environment that you're in, mimicry, and networking. And I'll get into those last two a little bit later. As far as this axis, here's how I like to think about it. TI wants to say 1 plus 1 is 2, whereas FE wants to say me plus you is much greater than the sum or the whole of the parts, right? So this idea of Gestalt or Gestalt psychology, teamwork makes the dream work. FE really wants to gel with others. It's a word that a lot of FE DOMs use, and it basically means to connect or bond with someone or something on an emotional level in order to really understand and connect with them in that way. Now, in order for FE to do this, when FE's in the first, TI's in the fourth, and basically thinking gets in the way of feeling, just like feeling gets in the way of thinking for dominant thinkers. In the sense that to really emotionally connect with someone, you can't be cold and logical, because especially externally and objectively, FE wants to assess the emotional environment that it's in, and with TI it just becomes too cold, so it turns it off. And I'm not saying that dominant feelers never think. Absolutely not. In Jung's chapter on extroverted feeling, he said one of his clients says, I can't think what I don't feel." That really resonates with the F and the T axis when the F is dominant. Like Neil deGrasse Tyson, I think, is typed as an ESFJ. And even though he's a scientist, even though he might come off as a very logical person, which he very well, is, it's this idea that his ability to connect with others, and especially his crowd and the audience, to feed off their energy and keep them interested, keep them entertained, that's what FE DOMs are extremely good at. Another way of looking at this axis is FE being a conversationalist, whereas TI is words, vocabulary, having an erudite vocabulary, really knowing how to structure grammatically sentences. Basically what I'm saying is that FE knows how to say something in terms of like what's appropriate and context, whereas TI is more what to say, kind of like syntax and semantics. Another example of FETI, or more specifically just FE, is, say we have FI and FE and they go see a movie, and The cinema is packed, all the seats are taken. Just as an example, if I want to sympathize with the characters on the screen and really have this mentality of like, what would it be like for me if I was the protagonist here? It's like, what if I was going through what they were going through? And let's just say that this movie is a really sad drama. FE, it's going to do the same, but more on an objective level. Let's say through empathy, it'll empathize with the characters, and more importantly, it'll empathize with everybody around that's sitting in the same theater as them. They will pick up on those waves of emotion and connect it as a whole, as one unit, and it'll come in waves, objectively, with the audience. It's something that is quite inconceivable for some people, especially FI DOMs, if they've never really heard of FE or studied FE or the cognitive functions before, because FI on a deeper, more subjective level will have these same waves, and in a sense they'll be more complex, whereas FE will connect with everyone else around it. And like, let's say that this movie gets to the climax and the protagonist is really going through a tough situation, that suspenseful music starts playing, the anxiety of the crowd rises, the FE Dom will feel on that, or pick up on that objective feeling of sadness and melancholy and connect on that level. They'll see it through that lens. Now, say that okay, before I continue with this example, I just want to say, Jung also in his chapter, he relates this to churches, stadiums like sporting events, concerts. It's that same sort of idea where it's sort of like I don't want to say mob mentality, but like the crowd feeling one giant emotion as one unit. That's FE, and that's how you can understand FE. Now, let's take this example and say that FE is the only person in the whole theater, because if FI isn't the only person, the conclusion's going to be the same, right? Because they have that deep subjective understanding, and FI doesn't really care if nobody else is in the theater. FE will care, in the sense that if the movie starts and nobody walks in, they're going to be like, all right, well, this movie sucks. Nobody else is showing up. I might as well just refund my ticket, because I know, if nobody else came to see it, that must mean that it's bad, right? And it's a very improbable scenario, because FE DOMs, they like going to these sorts of events with other people, and even if they go alone, they like to connect with the audience on that way. And if you have strong FE, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. But just consider that in this crazy scenario, a FE Dom is sitting alone in the theater. How would they then process the value of the movie, the aesthetics? I would think that the FE Dom would view it through an objective lens. They'll still empathize with the characters on the screen, but they don't like having their own subjective value assessments towards what they feel. They would rather feel, so to speak, through the lens of others. That sort of cognition, that sort of mentality. It's like, what would my friends think if they were watching this movie here? What would movie critics think about this movie? What would the entire collective unconscious of humanity feel about this movie? And that's how they would assess it, in my opinion. And maybe after they would drive home, they'd go on their phone and message their friends asking them what if they saw that movie or what they think about that movie, or even look up reviews online and sort of match their objective opinion with what others had to say about it in order to assess and understand it that way. Much like a TE user would value other sources, so would an FE Dom value other opinions in their own objective understanding of whatever it is they're looking at, whoever it is they're with. It's like, what would others think or feel about this situation that I'm in? That's why it can be a bit confusing for people that don't have strong FE, or just in that sense. Real quick, because I'm running low on time, we can take another example of networking, like say this is person A, person B, person C, or even in computing, like networking. FE would be the connection between these two networks, whereas TI would be the communications, the variables, the integers, all those fragmentary bits of information. That's what TI likes, but FE just wants to connect. Now, if these are other people, FE has this chameleon-like quality where, especially FE DOMs, when they walk into a room, they want to become one with the emotional harmony of the setting of that room. In other words, if it's a room full of nerds, they want to kind of be a nerd. Or if it's a room full of punks, they want to be a punk. In that sense, it wants to harmonize. It doesn't want to stick out, because if it sticks out, then it brings disharmony to the harmony that's already existing. Another way to look at it is like, if this is FE and this is FE's first day on the job, it wants to go and connect with the other workmates, because they're obviously going to be working together, and it wants to understand the environment that it's in. So it might go up to person B and be like, hey, could you show me around? Or like, it's my first day here, I just want to get acquainted, do you mind? Like a really nice, polite way of doing it, where it's hard for the other person to say no. And then they'll go over to person C and they'll be like, hey, what are you doing for lunch? You want to get lunch together? They'll connect slowly with everyone in the room and sort of get that emotional bond to the point that, like, 2 weeks later, everyone, generally speaking, as an example, knows the FE Dom, and they're like, hey, FE Dom, what's up? Just passing them in the hallway or whatever. And that harmony is, preserved, it's achieved. That's what FE likes. And say that it forms this team or unison between person A and C, and person B and C haven't met before. Objectively speaking, FE can understand person B and person C, and it's kind of like FE DOMs have this sort of matchmaker ability where they can network extremely well. If you own a business and you're looking for someone to work in HR, or for someone to go and seek out other clients, FE DOMs are extremely good at this, and they can close deals that are viewed as impossible, like impossible clients that always decline. If you send that FE DOM, chances are they might make it work, just because they have this ability to emotionally connect with others on an objective level. Now, it's not always so nice and friendly. Like, again, if this is like a team, and we also have person D over here, but they kind of do their own thing. They don't want to be part of the team, and they say some things that conflict with person A. FE, it can be very clever in this way where it ostracizes this person. Like, if you've watched The Office, this is kind of like Michael Scott, and like this is kind of like Toby in that sense. And you know, it can be cruel in that way, but this is the way that the world is, and it sucks to be this person. Like, this is a feels bad, man, but it happens to everyone, I guess, at least once in their life, where they just can't be part of a group. And if FE feels threatened by that person or that thing, they're gonna want to convince everyone else in that group to, not gel with them, so to speak. But yeah, the functions aren't always nice, even the feeling ones. So this is something to look out for. Okay, guys, so I'm gonna wrap up this video by talking about some of the differences between FI and FE. And I know I've spent a bit more time talking about the feeling functions. It's just that they're very often overlooked in the MBTI community, especially because people can have this viewpoint of the feeling functions being primitive, or just dealing with the mammalian brain, or animalistic. And please don't fall for that trap of just saying that, oh, feeling, yeah, that's emotions, and that's what I like and I don't like. No, that's a primitive perspective of the feeling function. Remember, these are cognitive functions. They're modes of measuring attention. A much more healthy and appropriate way of looking at the feeling function would be as like axiology, the study of values, ethics, aesthetics, morals, virtues, the sense of worth. That is something that animals don't do. Now, as far as sympathy and empathy, I really don't want to confuse you, and I'd urge you not to use a textbook definition of this is sympathy and this is empathy and it's set in stone. If you want to do that, that's fine. And even if you want to swap these two just to get to fit your understanding of FE and FI, it's absolutely fine. But let me start off with FI and sympathy. So why I correlate FI to sympathy is because in order to sympathize with someone, in order to really understand the situation that they're in or the story that they're telling, you need to be able to first understand your own emotions. And that's why I relate it to putting yourself in their shoes. See, FI DOMs, because they have this deep, profound understanding of themselves and what they're feeling, this is how they can relate to another person. And it's not a question of which is deeper, sympathy or empathy. I'll even go as far as to say that FI is deeper in the sense that it's an introverted function, and all the introverted functions are deeper than their extroverted counterparts. However, they're a bit slower and they take longer to process. So just a very general description. Remember, it's introverted, it wants to stay within, and FI wants to understand their own subjective emotions of what they're feeling and keep that emotional distance. See, it's more private in that sense. Is like they don't want to intrude on, or they don't want to pretend what the other person is feeling. They want to have the mentality of, what would it be like for me to be in this situation? What would it like? How would I feel if this happened to me? And through that process of cognition, they can relate to the other person on an emotional level through introverted feeling. It's more subjective, it's more deep. And I'd even go as far as to say it's more compassionate and sincere. Now, FE, this is where it can get a bit confusing, but first of all, FE, it wants to externalize its emotions. It's like it wants to radiate those emotions, and it wants to connect with other people, and it's of course an extroverted function, so the energy wants to go out, and this is why it's much easier to see and understand what an FE Dom is feeling in the present moment versus an FI Dom. Now, FE, and especially with FE Doms, it's like for them, if they really open up to you and they trust you, they'll tell you that they have this ability to pick up and empathize with others' emotions. So it's kind of like if you take scorpions, for example. Scorpions, they don't see very well. Their eyesight isn't very good, but they have these tiny little microscopic hairs on different parts of their body that help them pick up on different sensory vibrations of other insects or other objects, and it helps them navigate. That's kind of like FE. Or another way to look at FE is like there's mirror neurons, which is a really hot topic in neuroscience right now, and it's kind of like this ability to not feel your own subjective emotions, but it'll feel like you're feeling another person's emotions, kind of like a tingling external sensation on your skin. That's kind of FE, whereas FI, it'll feel these deep vibes. So with empathy, this is why I relate FE to empathy, because FE, it wants to connect with other people. If this other person is feeling blue, then FE will feel blue. If they're feeling red, then FE will feel red. And it'll connect, it'll mimic in that way. It's a bit difficult for some people to really grasp that, but I can go a bit deeper here, but I don't want to confuse you. I think this is a very simple way to look at the differences between FI and FE. And to conclude, FI, ultimately, it wants to understand what it means to be a human through the understanding of the self and the emotional experience that comes from within. Whereas FE, you can look at it as FE wants to understand what it means to be human beings, in the sense that it wants to relate to others and it wants to understand human beings on a collective basis, where FI is more about understanding of yourself as a person. There is no better or worse way of doing it. Remember, there's just two different ways of cognition. I hope this has helped you understand the differences between FE and FI. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and thanks for watching.